So I'm the VP of Growth and Marketing at Duolingo, which basically means I'm responsible for making Duolingo grow. For those of you who don't know, and I'll talk a little bit about this more, Duolingo is a language learning app. It's currently the most downloaded education app in the world. We have 170 million total users. And if you think about that, it's crazy because, I mean, learning a language is a little bit niche, if you think about it. It's not exactly a game. We have 22 million mouths, as was said before. And if you think about it, there are 22 million people actively learning a language with an app. So that's a lot. And today I'm going to talk about how we grew. And it's a particularly interesting story, I think, in this context because we didn't do any paid marketing or paid acquisition. So it was all organic. So we have to go through this really quickly and get to the point. We have very little time, so I thought it would be a good idea to start with my birth. How do I go back? So I was born, I'm just kidding. That's just a joke. Okay, so about Duolingo. So that's Duolingo, that's our website. We also have apps, 170 million users. We grew a lot very quickly. For those of you who've ever heard of Rosetta Stone, that was kind of like the default way to learn a language a while back. And when we launched, the goal of Duolingo was to bring free language education to the world. That's our mission, to improve people's lives by allowing anyone who wants to learn a second language. In many countries, if you speak English, for example, you can make 2 or 3 times as much money, but it's expensive. Rosetta Stone costs about $500. You know, they sell like the CD-ROMs in the malls. So this is a cool story of growth because it shows the trajectory since our launch, and this is in terms of how many people are searching for this on Google. So word of mouth spread so quickly that we ended up actually being invited to present to President Obama, which was super cool too. This is not relevant, it's just to make me look really important. So the first lesson, and there's going to be 2. The first one is how to acquire users with no budget. And basically what that means is how to allow people to find you really effectively, because you can't go after them and buy them. This one, the first thing I'm going to say might seem a little weird and retro. You know, PR is not considered like an exactly innovative growth hacking strategy, but it was actually one of the main things that we did to drive growth for Duolingo. It was one of our biggest drivers. And the reason for that is that if you can do PR effectively, you can get in front of millions of people and it's for free. Of course, you have to find an interesting way to tell the story such that reporters would be interested in what you're saying and people are interested in reading it. So the interesting thing about this is that, you know, when I interview people for PR, they often say things like, oh, you know, I did this campaign and we got X many placements in whatever magazines. We don't care about the placements. We don't care about numbers, vanity numbers. We care about how did this actually drive traffic to Duolingo. And so that's what we tracked for a very long time. So this is an example of when we launched in Brazil. And we did 2 different press rounds. Our CEO came down, gave talks, and then we had him talk to press. And this is the effect on the number of daily active users on Duolingo. And then another example is from Turkey. We did that all over the world, and we do that still with all of our launches. Next, I'm not going to go into detail, but App Store relations has really helped us in the beginning. Developing a relationship with someone at Google Play or iTunes, or if you're in China, there's 100 different stores, good luck. Developing a relationship with them to figure out what can you do to get featured. Because once you get featured, that's a really great way to get seen by people who are just casually browsing an app store. Of course, you have to have a good product, but there are certain things you can do, like maybe they're trying to do something special for Valentine's Day. So if you do something related to Valentine's Day, they're willing to feature you. If you're launching something exclusively for that platform, definitely let them know because they might be interested in featuring you. I'm not going to go into depth about App Store optimization because, you know, there's going to be a lot about this. I'm just going to highlight the 2 things that worked for us the most. If you kind of think ASO is complicated and don't want to get into it, the 2 things I would actually pay attention to are first, screenshots. So what that means is, you know, on the App Store, and this is for Google Play actually allows you to A/B test, which means it allows you to look at different versions of screenshots and what that does in terms of downloads versus iTunes, which doesn't allow you to do that. So just testing different screenshots and seeing which ones convert the most. And so what we did is we originally had these ones at the top, and it showed screens of what Duolingo looks like. We changed it to actually give it context. So on the bottom, it says on the top, like, learn a language. It's super fun. It's free. You know, play a game, whatever. And that helped us immensely. And also localizing that, making sure it's amazing how difficult it is to localize stuff. You think you have everything localized, and then you have a native read it, and they're like, what does this say? So just changing things slightly may make a huge difference. What we did at Duolingo is we created a spreadsheet, and we have a bunch of international, so 40% of our employees are international, and we said, fill out the spreadsheet with what you think it should say in our App Store thing, and whoever wins gets like whatever, a bonus. We gave away a prize, and so people started like, Duolingo, the best way to learn a language. Duolingo, it's free, whatever, and then finding the winning ones. And the second one is the short description. So there's a short description, there's a long description. If you don't have time, ignore the long description. It has not been at all useful to us. Of course, have stuff there that's relevant, but the short description is really what matters for getting found. SEO. Why are we talking about SEO? This is an apps promotion summit. We're not talking about the web. SEO, search engine optimization, means allowing Google or any search engine to actually find you. This matters even if you're an app, because a lot of us have websites and people discover your apps through the website. And more people are spending most of their time on mobile these days. So they might actually be on the web on their mobile phone. You want to make sure they can find you. SEO is a complicated beast. We have a PhD working on it actually, and we avoided it for years because we thought it was too complicated. But there are very simple things you can do that actually make a big difference. This example here is, so there's two different ways of thinking about SEO. First of all, how can Google find me? And that's basically like, how can I have the words on my website, on my URL, on my titles that people are going to be searching for and have that match? That's the search engine side of things. And that's as simple as changing a URL from like duolingo.com/blah to duolingo.com/about. That makes a huge difference. For this, it's thinking about it from the user standpoint. So someone who searches for learn French will probably not land on a Google search page that has duolingo.com. It'll say duolingo.com/blah blah blah French course. It's going to be a subpage of Duolingo. Because if they search for Duolingo, they land on Duolingo. If they search for Learn French, anyway, they're going to land on this page. That's what it looked like originally. From a company standpoint, we thought it would be a great idea to have stuff about the language. It's like French is a language you speak in Paris and is a language of love, blah, blah, blah. We were super excited about this. And then the second part is course contributors, people who helped us make this course. From a company perspective, it made all the sense in the world. But to a new user, when you land here, you're like, okay, what's this? Back. That's it. You lost your user. Our bounce rate was extremely high because people landed here, had no idea what was going on. We redesigned it such that people who had never heard of Duolingo before, when they landed there after searching for something like Learn Spanish, were able to see, oh, look, it's the world's most popular way to learn a language. And then the Start Learning button is huge. And that rate of conversion increased significantly just by doing that. Targeted marketing efforts, we barely spend any money on marketing, but we do a little bit. So for example, once a year, we do a thing for teachers where we give away 20 iPads. That's it, that's our investment. And the reason why I think this is important is because it's extremely targeted. So of course we want anyone in the world to use Duolingo, but teachers have a captive audience every day of at least 20 people, and they know each other, and they have new classes. So it's a really great way to spread the word kind of, very effectively. And so we target them, and that's where we put a little bit of our budget. We do it once a year at back to school, and we see a really nice spike. Social media. Social media is a weird thing because everyone talks about it all the time, but it's actually quite hard to measure direct traffic from your social media efforts to, at least in our case. We post something, we get on average 5,000 likes per post, which is a lot on Facebook. That one got 25,000 likes. And we don't actually see a direct spike in traffic to our website because people aren't clicking on that, as the previous speaker was saying. People aren't leaving Facebook, they're just kind of browsing. They're not leaving to go to your site. Facebook and social media are great ways to own the way that people perceive your brand and to get them to talk about it more. So the more they like it, the more they comment, the more they share, the more their friends are likely to ask them about it, etc. Actually, we see huge traffic from Facebook to Duolingo every day. It's one of our top referrers in terms of traffic. But it's not from our posts. It's because people are telling each other about it in conversation on Facebook. So how can we affect that? By just letting people see more of our content, get excited about it, think it's funny, be inspired. Second part, and I'm zooming through also because of time, activating and retaining users with app testing, so A/B testing. So this is a little bit of a change of pace. I'm putting on my growth hat now, and basically this is what we do from a product perspective to help people who landed on your app to actually sign up and then kind of hang out and come back the next day. At Duolingo, we test absolutely everything. Nothing goes out without it being an A/B test. So this is a really old version of Duolingo, the tree. And the question we were trying to answer was, what is the best way to learn a language? Should we be teaching food first or plurals? There's all these books, none of them agree with each other. We said, let's A/B test. So we created different versions of the tree, we call this a tree, and we give thousands of users each version, and we can actually see from switching food and plural, so 50,000 people get, food before plurals, 50,000 people get plurals before food, we can actually see how many of those people who had that version stuck around, learned more, came back the next day, and how that affected our metrics. Everything is tested. This is Duel the Owl. He's our mascot. It's also a very old version. It's a retro hipster duo. Just kidding. We A/B tested the number of tears that he cries and the size of the puddle and how that affects whether people are likely to start a lesson again because they feel guilty. And it actually does something. Just an example of how much we A/B test everything. And the reason why this really matters is you're going to have users who are very loud and who have opinions and who are going to tell you what they know is best for you and for your app. People don't like change. We've seen it with Facebook. They redesigned the homepage. Everyone's like, oh, I'm leaving Facebook. I'm gone. I hate this. Has anyone left Facebook? Nope. Same with this. So we have a forum. People are extremely loud. We redesigned the website and we got things like eye hurting colors and childish, zero usability. I would never recommend this page. Horrid. And then my favorite is it looks like a circus wagon exploded on it. I grew up in a circus, I should know. Interesting on so many levels. So if you read this and you're paying attention to your users like you're supposed to, and I mean, I'm not saying don't pay attention, but if you actually are just listening to them, you'll say, oh, like, this is terrible. We need to go back to our original thing. Then you look at the metrics. And this is the metrics for the web redesign. Red is basically the people who saw the old version, blue is the number of people, the people who saw the new version in terms of retention. There's like a very obvious win there. So we ignored the loud users, we kept the new page, and that helped our metrics a lot. And finally, some examples of A/B tests that really worked and why they say growth is a game of inches, like growth hacking people say that, which basically means that you can make efforts that result in 1%, 2%, 5% gains for your app, but overall it adds up, and that's really where you want to be focusing on when you're making these tests. So I chose examples that I thought could be applied to a lot of other apps. I hope this is relevant. So this one is, we originally required you to sign up to Duolingo to actually use it. You want to use Duolingo, you got to sign up. Why? Because we want people to sign up, and we want their emails. We changed this and allowed people to test Duolingo first, so now you can actually do a lesson or 2 lessons before we ask you to sign up, and we called it delayed sign up, and that increased our daily active users by 12%, which is huge. Another activation thing, after we did this delayed sign up thing, we have the safe, and it says like, now you have to sign up, and it says, discard my progress, create profile. One day we were browsing and we thought, discard my progress is a really big red button. I wonder if people are clicking on the red button just because it's red, because people do that. Let's redesign and see what happens if we take it away and let people do a later, which is softer. And that led to a 10% increase. DAUs on Android, 4% on web. Retention, keeping your users around. For language learning, this is essential because if you don't practice every day or almost every day, you're not going to learn a language. There are platforms that are going to promise that you can learn Chinese in 10 hours. You're not going to learn Chinese in 10 hours. You can study for 24 hours on Saturday. It's not going to work. You need to practice every day. So we need to create a behavior that enables our users to do that. So we wove that into the actual app design and our notifications. So we let people pick what their goal is per day, and then they maintain a streak, which means the number of days they came back to Duolingo consecutively. And people go nuts about this streak. There are people who have 2,000-day streaks, meaning they've been to Duolingo for 2,000 days, in a row, which is great. And that led to a huge improvement in retention and also DAUs. Playing hard to get. I don't know if you guys play Clash Royale, but basically they have like this chest thing, and you have to wait a while to see what the chest has. People like having to wait and not getting everything at once. They kind of like, thinking, I really want to find out what's here. I'll come back later and see it. So that worked out well for us too. Notifications, huge for retention, huge. That's probably one of our most important things. Optimizing the crap out of that is super worth it. Our CEO said, don't bother, we already optimized when we launched, and I was like, no, let's see what we can do. So what that means is rewriting copy, and it's literally a change in a tiny little word here or there, or tone, can make a world of a difference when you're sending notifications to people to get them to come back to your app. So we made it a little bit more personalized. It says, hi, it's Duo, like the owl. It's time for your daily Spanish lesson. That's the one that won. Take 5 minutes now to complete it. Lesson 3, focus. Focus is the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing for, I think, anyone. And for companies, for startups, and for anything that you're trying to do. There's so many things you can change on a single day. There's so many things you can improve in your app. There's so many marketing strategies you can apply. There's just too much. How do you figure out how to prioritize? So after a while of doing this with our team, we came up with sort of this formula. And basically, when we're figuring out whether we should, make it so that when you finish Duolingo, the experience is more fun versus improve the sign-up screen, we look at how many users are we going to affect by making that change. Obviously, when you're looking at the end and the people who finish the tree, those are your super active users. You're probably okay not doing anything for them. And it's a very small number compared to all the people who first saw Duolingo and tried it out. So focusing on that beginning of the funnel or focusing on things that really affect a lot of people matters. And then think about, okay, if we make this change, how much do we think we can actually honestly improve? And normally our guess is 1%, because that's about our baseline. We can improve this by 1%. And this is whatever metric you really care about. There are a lot of different metrics to care about. You have to compare them. So for example, you can do something that increases signups, but then people are not signing in anymore, and that's a problem. So look at the metric that matters. We look at DAUs, and see, how much gains you can get overall from that, and then times amount of effort. Some changes are 2 lines of code. Some changes are a week of design, a week of implementation, and then months of A/B testing. And so just try to think of that. And this is my final point, and this basically is just a summary of my talk. If you remember one thing from my talk today, remember, if you can't measure it, you can improve it, and this applies to everything. If you're doing PR, if you're doing more of the soft marketing type stuff, look at the metrics. If it's affecting your metrics, great. If it's not, it's probably time to do something else. And same thing with app improvements. If your users are happy, if the people in your team think it looks pretty, if your CEO gave you a bonus, none of this matters. What matters is, are your metrics actually improving, and are the metrics you care about actually improving?